If you're walking away from dates feeling more confused than when you arrived, questioning everything he said, replaying every moment in your mind, and wondering if you're losing your ability to read people, I need you to stop what you're doing and listen carefully. What you're experiencing isn't confusion. It's not your intuition failing you, and it's definitely not a sign that you're too old to understand modern dating. What's happening to you is a calculated psychological manipulation technique that predatory men have perfected, specifically for mature, intelligent women like you. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how they're doing it, why it works so devastatingly well on experienced women, and most importantly, the precise steps you need to take to never fall for this manipulation again. Welcome back to The Heart Code, where we decode the hidden patterns in relationships and give you the knowledge to protect your peace, your power, and your future. I'm so glad you're here today because what we're going to discuss will fundamentally change how you approach dating and relationships. Before we dive deep into this critical topic, if you find value in this content, please take a moment to like this video. Your like tells me you want more content like this. Drop a comment below sharing your experiences or thoughts. It helps this message reach more women who desperately need to hear it. Share this video with any woman in your life who's navigating the dating world, because this information could save her from months or even years of emotional manipulation. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss crucial insights that could transform your relationship life. For those of you who want to support this channel and help me continue bringing you this essential content, I'm incredibly grateful for your super thanks. Your support allows me to research, develop, and deliver the most comprehensive relationship education available. Now, let's get into exactly why you're feeling confused after every date. Let me paint you a picture that I know will feel painfully familiar. You went on a date with someone who seemed promising. The conversation flowed. He seemed interested. He asked questions. He shared stories. There were moments where you felt a genuine connection forming. Maybe he said something that made you laugh. Maybe he looked at you in a way that made you feel seen. Maybe he touched your hand and there was that little spark. But then, as you're driving home or lying in bed that night, something feels off. You can't quite put your finger on it, but there's this nagging sense that something wasn't right. You start replaying the evening in your mind. What did he mean when he said that thing about his ex? Why did his story about his job seem to change halfway through? Was he really listening when you talked about your children, or was he just waiting for his turn to speak? Why did he suddenly check his phone multiple times after seeming so engaged? And most confusing of all, why do you feel more uncertain about him now than you did before you met him? This confusion you're experiencing, this mental fog that descends after dates, isn't random. It's not a coincidence, and it's definitely not your fault. What you're experiencing is the result of a sophisticated manipulation tactic that certain men use specifically on mature, intelligent, successful women. These men have learned that traditional manipulation tactics that work on younger, less experienced women don't work on you. You've lived too much life. You've learned too many lessons. You've developed too much wisdom. You can spot the obvious red flags from a mile away. You're not falling for the classic player moves or the transparent love-bombing techniques that would have worked on your younger self. So these men have adapted. They've developed a more subtle, more insidious approach. And this approach centers on one core strategy: creating confusion. Here's what you need to understand about confusion as a manipulation tool. When you're confused, you're vulnerable. When you're uncertain, you seek clarity. And when you're seeking clarity, you become invested in finding it. This investment, this need to understand and make sense of what's happening, creates an emotional and psychological attachment that the manipulator can exploit. Think about it. When something is clear-cut, when you know exactly what's going on and exactly how you feel about it, you make quick, confident decisions. If a man is obviously wrong for you, you walk away. If he's obviously right, you move forward. But when you're confused, you pause, you wait, you observe, you give him more time, you give him more chances, you give him more access to your life, your thoughts, your emotions, and your energy. And that's exactly what he wants. Now, before we go further, I want to acknowledge something important. Not every man who leaves you feeling confused is doing it intentionally. Some men are genuinely confusing because they're confused themselves. They don't know what they want. They're emotionally immature. They're not self-aware enough to communicate clearly. They're carrying unresolved trauma that affects their behavior in ways they don't understand. These men will also leave you feeling confused, and we'll talk about how to identify and handle those situations too. But right now, I want to focus on the men who are creating confusion deliberately, strategically, and systematically, because these are the most dangerous. These are the ones who can cause the most damage, and these are the ones you absolutely must learn to identify immediately. Let's break down exactly how this manipulation works. The confusion creation technique has several distinct components, and understanding each one will help you recognize it when it's happening to you. The first component is called strategic inconsistency. This is when a man deliberately sends mixed signals, not because he's uncertain, but because he wants to keep you off balance. He'll be incredibly attentive one day and distant the next. He'll make plans with enthusiasm and then be vague about following through. He'll share something deeply personal and then shut down when you try to reciprocate. He'll compliment you genuinely and then make a subtle dig that makes you question if you imagined the compliment. Each individual instance might seem explainable. Maybe he was tired, maybe he was stressed, maybe you're being too sensitive, but when you look at the pattern, you see the inconsistency is the only consistent thing about him. The reason this works so well on mature women specifically is because you've been taught your entire life to be understanding, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to look for the best in people, to be compassionate about their struggles. You know that people are complex. You know that everyone has good days and bad days. You know that past trauma affects present behavior. So when you see these inconsistencies, your first instinct isn't to see it as manipulation. Your first instinct is to try to understand it, to make sense of it, to figure out what's really going on beneath the surface. And while you're doing all that emotional and mental labor, trying to understand him, he's getting exactly what he wants: your attention, your energy, and your continued presence in his life without having to commit. Be consistent or treat you with the respect you deserve. The second component of confusion creation is what I call partial truth-telling. This is when a man shares information that's technically true but deliberately incomplete or misleading. He'll tell you he's divorced, but he won't mention he's still living with his ex-wife. He'll say he loves spending time with his kids, but he won't tell you they refuse to speak to him. He'll talk about his successful career, but he'll leave out the part about being on the verge of bankruptcy. He'll mention his last relationship ended mutually, but he won't share that he was caught cheating. These partial truths are incredibly effective because they pass the basic test of honesty. If you later discover the full truth and confront him, he can say, "I never lied to you. I told you I was divorced. I told you about my kids. I told you about my career. I told you my last relationship ended. Everything I said was true." And technically, he's right. He didn't lie. He just didn't tell you the whole truth. And by the time you discover what he left out, you're already emotionally invested. Mature women are particularly vulnerable to this technique because you value honesty and direct communication. When someone tells you something personal, especially early in dating, you interpret it as trust and vulnerability. You think, he's being open with me. He's sharing his life with me. He's letting me in. This creates a sense of intimacy and connection that feels real. And because what he told you was technically true, you don't have your guards up the way you would if he had lied directly. You're not looking for what he didn't say. You're not thinking about what information might be missing. You're taking his words at face value because you're an honest person and you assume others operate the same way. This is one of the most painful realizations many women come to in their later years, that the way you operate, the way you communicate, the way you present yourself isn't the way everyone else does. Some people see your directness and honesty not as a virtue to match, but as a weakness to exploit. The third component is strategic future faking combined with present moment ambiguity. This is when a man talks enthusiastically about future possibilities while being deliberately vague about current intentions. He'll say things like, "I could see us traveling together," or "I would love to introduce you to my friends someday," or "It would be nice to have someone to spend holidays with." Notice the language. Could see, would love, would be nice, someday. These aren't commitments. These aren't plans. These are possibilities. But when you're on a date, especially a date that's going well, your brain processes these statements as indicators of his interest and intentions. You think he's imagining a future with me. He's thinking long-term. He sees potential here. And that feels good. That feels promising. That feels like you're on the same page. But here's what's actually happening. He's getting you to invest emotionally in a future vision without making any actual commitment in the present. And when you follow up later, when you try to make concrete plans, when you want to move from someday to a specific day, he becomes vague. He's suddenly busy. He needs to check his schedule. He's not sure about his availability. He has a lot going on. He needs to take things slow. And now you're confused because the man who was talking about introducing you to his friends can't commit to a dinner next week. The man who could see you traveling together isn't sure if he can make plans for next month. The disconnect between his future talk and his present actions creates cognitive dissonance, and your brain struggles to reconcile these two contradictory pieces of information. Mature women are especially susceptible to this because you're at a stage in life where you're thinking about the future seriously. You're not interested in wasting time. You want to know if someone is truly compatible and truly interested before you invest deeply. So when a man talks about the future, even in vague terms, it feels like he's showing you that he's serious, that he's thinking long-term, that he's on the same page about wanting something meaningful. You don't realize that his future talk is actually a stalling tactic. He's keeping you engaged and hopeful while avoiding any real commitment or progress in the present. And by the time you recognize the pattern, by the time you realize that the future he talked about never seems to get any closer, you've already invested weeks or months of your time and emotional energy. The fourth component is what I call emotion mirroring without depth. This is when a man reflects back your emotions, your values, and your desires without actually possessing them himself. You talk about how important family is to you, and suddenly family is important to him too. You mention that you value honesty and communication, and he wholeheartedly agrees. Those are his top priorities. You share your love of travel, art, nature, or any other interest, and he happens to share those exact same interests. In the moment, this feels like incredible compatibility. You think, wow, we have so much in common. We want the same things. We value the same things. We're so aligned. But what's actually happening is that he's holding up a mirror. He's reflecting back to you exactly what you want to see. He's not sharing his authentic self. He's creating a persona designed to match your desires. The way to spot this is by paying attention to depth and specificity. When someone genuinely shares your interests or values, they can talk about them with depth, with examples, with stories, with specifics. If you say you love travel and he says he does too, a genuine shared interest would include him talking about specific places he's been, experiences he's had, trips he's planning, aspects of travel that excite him. But with emotion mirroring, you'll notice the responses are surface level. He agrees enthusiastically but doesn't elaborate. He validates your feelings but doesn't share his own. He matches your energy but doesn't bring his own. And when you try to go deeper, when you ask follow-up questions or want to explore these supposedly shared interests together, he deflects, changes the subject, or keeps things general. Mature women fall for this because you've learned that compatibility is crucial in relationships. You've been in relationships where you and your partner wanted different things, valued different things, had different priorities, and you've experienced the pain and frustration that comes from that misalignment. So when you meet someone who seems to be aligned with you on all the important things, it feels like you found something rare and valuable. You don't immediately question whether that alignment is genuine because you're not thinking in terms of manipulation. You're thinking in terms of compatibility. And by the time you notice that his actions don't align with the values he claimed to share, that his behavior doesn't reflect the priorities he said were important, you're already emotionally invested in the relationship you thought you were building. The fifth component is strategic information gathering disguised as genuine interest. This is when a man asks detailed questions about your life, your past, your desires, your fears, your vulnerabilities, not because he genuinely cares and wants to know you, but because he's gathering information he can use to manipulate you more effectively later. He asks about your past relationships and listens carefully as you explain what went wrong, what hurt you, what you wish had been different. He asks about your relationship with your children, your parents, your friends. He asks about your work, your financial situation, your living situation. He asks about your dreams, your goals, your fears, your insecurities, and you share because his questions feel like genuine interest. They feel like emotional intimacy. They feel like he's really trying to know you, to understand you, to see you. But here's what he's actually doing. He's mapping your psychological landscape. He's identifying your vulnerabilities. He's learning what you need, what you fear, what you crave, what you'll tolerate, and what will make you pull away. And once he has this information, he uses it strategically. If he learned that your last relationship ended because your partner was emotionally unavailable, he makes sure to appear emotionally available, at least initially. If he learned that financial stability is important to you, he presents himself as financially stable, even if he's not. If he learned that you fear being alone, he subtly activates that fear whenever you start to pull away. If he learned that you respond to vulnerability, he shares just enough vulnerability to keep you engaged without actually being truly open. Mature women are particularly vulnerable to this because you've learned that emotional intimacy is built through sharing and being known. You've learned that vulnerability creates connection. You've learned that asking questions and showing interest in someone's inner world is what separates meaningful relationships from superficial ones. So when a man asks you deep questions, when he wants to know your story, when he seems genuinely interested in understanding who you are, it feels like the beginning of real intimacy. You respond by opening up, by sharing, by letting him see parts of you that you don't show everyone. And in doing so, you're giving him the blueprint for how to manipulate you. You're literally telling him exactly what to say and do to keep you hooked. Now, all of these components work together to create what I call the confusion loop. Here's how the confusion loop operates. First, he does something that creates confusion. Maybe it's a mixed signal, a partial truth, vague future talk, surface-level mirroring, or probing questions that feel slightly off. You notice something isn't quite right, and you feel that confusion starting to build. Second, instead of trusting your confusion as a warning sign, you try to resolve it. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You give him the benefit of the doubt. You look for explanations that make his behavior make sense. You ask him gentle questions to try to understand better. Third, he responds in a way that partially resolves your confusion, but introduces new confusion. He gives you an explanation that sounds reasonable but doesn't quite add up. He reassures you, but his reassurance comes with a subtle blame shift that makes you feel like your confusion is your problem, not his behavior. He clarifies one thing but is vague about something else. Fourth, you feel temporary relief because you got some kind of answer or explanation, but the underlying confusion remains or even deepens. Fifth, because you've now invested energy in trying to understand him and resolve your confusion, you're more committed than you were before. You've created a narrative that makes his behavior make sense, and you've emotionally invested in that narrative being true. Sixth, he does something else confusing and the loop starts again. But each time through the loop, you're more invested. Each time through the loop, you've put more energy into trying to understand him and make the relationship work. Each time through the loop, it becomes harder to walk away, because walking away would mean admitting that all that energy and time was wasted. This is why you feel more confused after every date, not less. Each interaction is adding another layer of confusion, while simultaneously increasing your investment in resolving that confusion. It's a psychological trap that's incredibly difficult to escape once you're in it. And the most insidious part is that it makes you doubt yourself. You start thinking, why can't I figure this out? Why am I so confused? Why does everyone else seem to understand relationships better than I do? Am I losing my ability to read people? Am I too damaged from past relationships? Am I too suspicious, too guarded, too critical? The confusion makes you question your own judgment, your own intuition, your own perception of reality. And once you're doubting yourself, you're even more vulnerable to manipulation because you're no longer trusting your own internal warning system. Let me give you some specific examples so you can see how this plays out in real situations. Example 1. The man who talks about commitment but avoids defining the relationship. You've been seeing each other for several weeks or months. The dates are regular. The communication is consistent. He talks about how tired he is of the dating scene, how he's looking for something real, how he wants a partner to build a life with. But when you try to have a conversation about what you are to each other, about whether you're exclusive, about where this is going, he becomes evasive. He says things like, I thought we were on the same page, or I don't like labels, they're so limiting, or why do we need to define it? Isn't it obvious how I feel about you, or I feel like you're rushing things? Can't we just enjoy what we have? You walk away from these conversations feeling confused because his words about wanting commitment don't match his resistance to actually committing. Example 2. The man who shares trauma but refuses accountability. He opens up about his difficult childhood, his painful divorce, his struggles with depression or anxiety, the ways he's been hurt or betrayed in past relationships. He shares these things with apparent vulnerability, and you feel honored that he trusts you with this information. You feel compassion for what he's been through. But as time goes on, you notice that every time there's a problem in your relationship, every time you try to address something that's bothering you, he uses his trauma as a shield. He can't handle conflict because of his childhood. He can't commit because his ex-wife destroyed his ability to trust. He can't communicate better because his depression makes it hard. He can't show up consistently because his anxiety is overwhelming. His trauma becomes an excuse for bad behavior, and you're left feeling confused because you want to be compassionate about his struggles, but you also know that his struggles don't erase your needs or make his treatment of you acceptable. Example 3. The man who's present in person but absent in between. When you're together, he's attentive, he listens, he engages, He seems fully present and interested, but between dates, communication is sporadic at best. He takes hours or days to respond to messages. His responses are brief. He rarely initiates contact. When you bring this up, he says he's not a big texter, or he's been really busy with work, or he doesn't like being on his phone all the time. And these explanations sound reasonable. But you're confused because if he's so interested when you're together, why does it feel like you barely exist when you're apart? The disconnect between his in-person behavior and his between dates behavior creates constant uncertainty about where you stand and how he really feels about you. Example 4, the man who makes plans but doesn't follow through. He talks enthusiastically about things you should do together. Restaurants to try, shows to see, trips to take, people to meet. He initiates these conversations. He's the one bringing up ideas and making suggestions. But when it comes time to actually make concrete plans, he's suddenly unavailable, uncertain, or he simply doesn't follow through. The reservations don't get made. The tickets don't get bought. The dates get postponed indefinitely. And you're confused because he's the one who suggested these things in the first place. Why would he bring them up if he didn't intend to follow through? You start to wonder if you're being too pushy by trying to actually make these plans happen, even though he's the one who suggested them. Example 5, the man who's jealous but not committed. He asks questions about other men in your life. He makes comments when you mention male friends or colleagues. He seems bothered when you're not immediately available or when you're spending time with other people. But at the same time, he won't commit to exclusivity. He won't define the relationship. He keeps his options open, and you're confused because his behavior suggests he wants you to be exclusive to him, but his words and his lack of commitment suggest he doesn't want to be exclusive to you. You're left in this bizarre space where you feel pressure to behave like you're in a committed relationship, while he maintains all the freedom of being single. These examples all share common threads. The man's words don't match his actions. His present behavior doesn't align with his stated future intentions. He creates intimacy in some areas while maintaining distance in others. He shows interest while avoiding commitment. He shares while withholding. He's present while being absent. And all of these contradictions create confusion. Your brain is trying to reconcile incompatible information. You're trying to create a coherent narrative out of incoherent behavior. And that process is exhausting, frustrating, and ultimately unsuccessful because you can't make sense of behavior that's deliberately designed not to make sense. Now let's talk about why this manipulation technique works so particularly well on mature, intelligent, successful women. You would think that life experience, emotional maturity, and developed intuition would make you less vulnerable to manipulation, not more. And in many ways, that's true. You don't fall for the obvious stuff. You spot the classic player moves. You recognize love bombing. You know when someone is being fake or putting on a show. But the confusion creation technique works on a different level. It exploits your strengths and your wisdom rather than your weaknesses or naivety. First, it exploits your analytical abilities. You're intelligent. You're used to figuring things out. When you encounter a problem, your instinct is to analyze it, understand it, and solve it. In your career, in your family life, in managing your household, in handling your responsibilities, this analytical ability has served you well. But when applied to confusing behavior from a manipulative person, your analytical ability becomes a trap. You keep analyzing, keep trying to understand, keep looking for the pattern or explanation that will make everything make sense. And while you're doing all this mental work, you're staying engaged with someone who doesn't deserve your engagement. A younger woman might just shrug and say, "This is weird, I'm out." But you, with your developed analytical abilities, keep trying to solve the puzzle. And that's exactly what keeps you stuck. Second, it exploits your emotional maturity and compassion. You understand that people are complex. You know that everyone has baggage. You've done your own healing work, and you know how difficult it is to overcome past pain and trauma. You don't expect perfection. You're willing to be patient. You're willing to be understanding. You're willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. These are beautiful qualities. These are signs of emotional maturity and wisdom. But when dealing with a manipulative person, these qualities become vulnerabilities. He relies on your compassion to excuse his behavior. He relies on your understanding to accept his inconsistencies. He relies on your patience to keep giving him chances. He knows that you won't walk away at the first sign of trouble because you're mature enough to know that all relationships require work and all people have flaws. Third, it exploits your desire for meaningful connection. At this stage in your life, you're not interested in superficial relationships. You've had your share of meaningless dates and shallow connections. You know what you want: genuine intimacy, real partnership, authentic connection. So when a man seems to offer depth, when he asks meaningful questions and shares personal things, when he talks about wanting something real, you respond to that. You engage with that. You invest in that. You don't realize that he's giving you the appearance of depth without the substance. He's learned the language of emotional intimacy without actually being emotionally intimate. He knows what meaningful connection looks like on the surface, and he's recreating that surface while keeping himself protected and uninvested beneath it. Fourth, it exploits your independence and self-sufficiency. You've built a life for yourself. You have your own home, your own finances, your own friends, your own interests, your own identity. You don't need a man to complete you or take care of you. You're looking for a partner, not a rescuer. This independence is a strength, but it also means that you're more tolerant of behavior that younger, less independent women wouldn't tolerate. When he's inconsistent, you think, well, I have my own life anyway. When he's unavailable, you think, I have plenty to keep me busy. When he's vague about plans, you think, I'm flexible, I can work with that. Your independence allows you to tolerate breadcrumbs of relationship because you're not dependent on him for your happiness or survival. But tolerance isn't the same as acceptance, and flexibility isn't the same as having no standards. Fifth, it exploits your relationship history. You've been in relationships before. You know they're not always easy. You know they require effort, compromise, communication, and patience. You know that the beginning is often awkward and uncertain. You know that people don't always express themselves clearly. You know that trust takes time to build. All of this knowledge and experience makes you more tolerant of confusion in the early stages of dating. You think, maybe this is just normal relationship ambiguity. Maybe I need to be more patient. Maybe I need to give it more time. Maybe I'm being too demanding or expecting too much too soon. You second-guess your concerns because you know that good relationships don't always start perfectly. But there's a difference between normal early dating uncertainty and deliberate confusion creation. And your relationship history, instead of helping you spot the difference, sometimes makes you more likely to explain away the red flags. Sixth, it exploits your fear of being alone. And this is a difficult one to acknowledge, but it's important. Despite your independence, despite your full life, despite genuinely enjoying your own company, there's often a part of you that fears ending up alone. You see friends paired off. You see the couples at restaurants and movies and traveling together. You see the security and comfort of partnership. You know that dating gets harder as you get older, not easier. The pool of available men shrinks. The ones who are available often have significant baggage. The energy required to keep putting yourself out there is exhausting. So when you meet someone who seems promising, even if he's confusing, even if something feels off, there's a part of you that wants to make it work. There's a part of you that's willing to overlook concerns, to be patient, to give him more time, because the alternative, going back to dating apps, Starting over with strangers, facing more disappointment, feels overwhelming. Now, here's what you need to understand. None of these vulnerabilities are your fault. None of them are weaknesses. They're actually signs of your strength, your maturity, your emotional development, and your self-awareness. The problem isn't with you. The problem is with men who deliberately exploit these qualities for their own benefit. And the solution isn't to become less analytical, less compassionate, less seeking of depth, less independent, less experienced, or more comfortable with being alone. The solution is to recognize when these qualities are being exploited and to protect yourself accordingly. So how do you protect yourself? How do you distinguish between normal early relationship uncertainty and deliberate confusion creation? How do you trust your intuition when you're being told that you're overthinking or being too sensitive or not giving things enough time? Let me give you specific actionable strategies that you can implement immediately. Strategy 1. Trust confusion itself as a red flag. This is counterintuitive, but it's crucial. In healthy, genuine connections, even in the early stages, there might be nervousness. There might be questions about compatibility. There might be uncertainty about whether the feelings are mutual, but there shouldn't be fundamental confusion about what's happening. You should understand where you stand. Even if where you stand is, we're getting to know each other and neither of us knows yet if this will go anywhere. Confusion is different from uncertainty. Uncertainty is about the future. Confusion is about the present. If you're confused about what happened, what he meant, whether he's interested, whether he's being honest, whether his behavior matches his words, that confusion itself is information. Stop treating it as a problem to solve and start treating it as a warning to heed. Strategy 2. Document patterns, not incidents. One confusing moment might be explainable. A pattern of confusing moments is not. Start keeping notes, either mentally or actually written down, of times when his behavior doesn't match his words, when you feel confused after interactions, when something feels off. Don't just note what happened. Note your emotional response. When you look at these notes over time, you'll be able to see patterns that are harder to see in the moment. You'll notice that every date leaves you feeling uncertain, or that he's consistently vague about certain topics, or that he only reaches out at certain times or under certain circumstances, or that he makes plans but never follows through. Patterns reveal truth that individual incidents obscure. Strategy 3. Watch what he does, not what he says. This is dating advice as old as time, but it's particularly relevant when dealing with confusion creation. A man who wants to see you makes plans. A man who values you treats you with consistency and respect. A man who's emotionally available shares appropriate vulnerability and asks appropriate questions. A man who's serious about building something with you moves forward, not in circles. Pay attention to actions. If his actions don't align with his words, believe the actions. And when his actions and words don't align, say so. Don't let it slide. Don't make excuses. Don't fill in the gaps with generous interpretations. Point out the inconsistency directly and pay attention to how he responds. Strategy 4. Refuse to do all the emotional labor. In healthy relationships, both people invest in understanding each other, working through confusion, and building connection. In manipulative dynamics, you do all the work. You're the one trying to understand him. You're the one making excuses for his behavior. You're the one adjusting your expectations. You're the one compromising your needs. You're the one initiating difficult conversations. You're the one trying to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it. Stop doing this. When something is confusing, say so and put the responsibility on him to clarify. Don't spend hours analyzing what he might have meant. Ask him what he meant. Don't make generous assumptions. Require clear communication. And if he's unwilling or unable to provide clarity, take that as your answer. Strategy 5. Set clear expectations and boundaries early. Don't be afraid to communicate what you want and need, even in the early stages of dating. A man who's genuinely interested and available will appreciate your clarity. A man who's looking to manipulate or string you along will balk at your boundaries. You're doing yourself a favor by filtering them out early. Say things like, "I'm looking for a committed relationship, and I'm not interested in something casual or undefined." Say, "I need consistent communication, even if it's just a quick text, to stay connected." Say, "I appreciate vulnerability, but I also need accountability." Say, "I prefer to make concrete plans rather than vague maybes." A good man will step up. A manipulative man will make you feel like you're being demanding or rushing things. Strategy 6. Notice how he responds to your concerns. When you express confusion, uncertainty, or concern about something he said or did, pay very close attention to his response. A genuine, non-manipulative man will take your concerns seriously. He'll apologize if he caused confusion. He'll clarify his intentions. He'll adjust his behavior. He'll validate your feelings even if he doesn't agree with your interpretation. He'll work with you to resolve the issue. A manipulative man will deflect, blame shift, gaslight, or create more confusion. He'll make you feel like you're overthinking. He'll accuse you of being too sensitive or too demanding. He'll turn it around so suddenly you're defending yourself instead of him addressing your concern. He'll give you just enough reassurance to quiet your concerns without actually changing anything. The response to your concerns tells you everything you need to know about his character and his intentions. Strategy 7. Be willing to walk away from confusion. This is the hardest but most important strategy. You have to be willing to end a connection that consistently leaves you confused, even if he seems great in other ways, even if you feel chemistry, even if you're afraid of starting over, even if you're worried you're giving up on something that could have been good. Because here's the truth: anything good that's built on a foundation of confusion will eventually crumble. You cannot build a healthy relationship with someone who keeps you perpetually off balance. You cannot create lasting intimacy with someone who plays games with your emotions and your perception. You cannot find peace with someone who makes you doubt yourself. Walking away from confusion is walking toward clarity, self-respect, and the possibility of finding someone who communicates clearly and treats you with consistency. Let me address some common objections and concerns that might be running through your mind right now. You might be thinking, but what if I'm just overthinking? What if I'm being too critical? What if I'm sabotaging something good because I'm looking for problems? These are valid concerns, and it's good that you're asking these questions because it shows self-awareness. But here's how to distinguish between overthinking and recognizing manipulation. Overthinking typically happens before something goes wrong. You're anxious about what might happen. You're creating problems that don't exist yet. You're imagining negative scenarios that haven't occurred. Recognizing manipulation happens in response to actual behavior that's already occurred. You're not imagining problems. You're responding to real inconsistencies, real confusion, real behavior that doesn't add up. If you're constantly feeling confused after actual interactions with actual words and actions to respond to, that's not overthinking. That's your intuition trying to get your attention. You might also be thinking, but maybe he's just going through a hard time. Maybe his confusion is genuine. Maybe he needs patience and support. And yes, that's possible. People do go through difficult times. People do struggle with clarity about what they want. But here's the key distinction. A person who's genuinely confused about what they want will either work actively to figure it out or will communicate their confusion honestly and not string you along while they figure it out. They'll say, "I really like you, but I'm not in a good place right now to give you what you deserve." Or, "I'm genuinely uncertain about what I want in terms of relationships. and I need to work that out before I can move forward with you. Or I'm dealing with some things that are affecting my ability to be present, and I need to handle those before I can be the partner you need. A person who's genuinely confused but who values you will not keep you in limbo. A manipulative person who's creating confusion deliberately will keep you engaged while giving you nothing solid to hold on to. Another common concern: what if I'm not giving him enough time? What if relationships just need more time to develop and I'm being impatient? Here's the thing about time. Time reveals character. Time reveals patterns. Time reveals intentions. If you're giving something time and the confusion is decreasing, if understanding is increasing, if consistency is improving, then time is doing its job. But if you're giving something time and the confusion is staying the same or increasing, if you're not getting more clarity but less, if you're understanding less about who he is and what he wants the longer you know him instead of more, then time isn't helping. Time isn't the issue. The issue is his behavior. And more time will just mean more confusion and more of your energy wasted. Now let's talk about what to do if you recognize yourself in this situation. If you're currently dating someone and you realize as you're watching this that the confusion you've been feeling is actually manipulation, what do you do now? First, honor what you're feeling. Don't push it down. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't let anyone else talk you out of it. Your confusion, your discomfort, your sense that something is off, these are valid. They're real. They're important. Second, stop trying to fix it or figure it out. This isn't a problem you can solve through better communication or more understanding or greater patience. This is who he is and how he operates. You can't fix it because it's not broken from his perspective. It's working exactly as he intends. Third, create distance immediately. Stop initiating contact. Stop being available whenever he reaches out. Stop trying to make plans or move things forward. Stop doing emotional labor. Stop analyzing his behavior. Stop making excuses. Create physical and emotional space and see what happens. One of two things will happen. Either he'll step up, recognize that you're pulling back, have a genuine conversation about what's going on, and make real, observable changes to his behavior. Or he'll let you drift away because you were never a priority to begin with. You were just an option he wanted to keep available. Either way, you'll get clarity, and clarity, even painful clarity, is always better than confusion. Fourth, trust yourself. Trust your perception. Trust your intuition. Trust your standards. Trust your right to want what you want and need what you need. If people in your life are telling you that you're being too picky or too demanding or too sensitive, question whether those people have your best interests at heart and whether they understand what you're actually experiencing. Some people, even well-meaning people, will encourage you to settle because they're uncomfortable with your standards, threatened by your willingness to be alone rather than accept less than you deserve, or simply unable to imagine holding out for what you truly want. Your worth is not determined by whether you're in a relationship. Your value is not increased by accepting poor treatment. Your success is not measured by your ability to make things work with someone who isn't making things work with you. Fifth, if you decide to end this connection, which I strongly encourage if the confusion is consistent and ongoing, be clear and be final. Don't leave the door open. Don't say maybe in the future or if things change. Don't give him an opening to talk you out of your decision or to make promises about change that he won't keep. Say something like, "I've realized this isn't working for me. I feel consistently confused and uncertain in our interactions, and that's not the foundation I want for a relationship. I wish you well, but I'm moving on." And then actually move on. Block if necessary. Delete his number if that helps. Don't check his social media. Don't respond to breadcrumbs. Don't let him pull you back into the confusion cycle with a sudden surge of clarity and attention that will fade as soon as you're hooked again. Let's also talk about recovery from these experiences. If you've been in a confusing situationship or relationship and you've finally ended it, you might be dealing with a lot of difficult emotions. You might feel angry at him for manipulating you. You might feel angry at yourself for not seeing it sooner or for staying longer than you wish you had. You might feel grief for the relationship you thought you were building. You might feel confused about what was real and what wasn't. You might feel exhausted from all the emotional energy you expended trying to make sense of things. You might feel distrustful of your own judgment. All of these feelings are normal and valid. Here's what you need to know about recovery. First, what happened wasn't your fault. You didn't make him manipulative. You didn't cause his confusing behavior. You responded like any reasonable, compassionate, intelligent person would respond when faced with mixed signals from someone they cared about. You tried to understand. You tried to be patient. You tried to work through it. These are good instincts in healthy relationships. The problem wasn't your response. The problem was his behavior. Second, you didn't waste time. You learned. Every experience, even painful ones, teaches us something if we're willing to pay attention. You learned what confusion feels like in your body. You learned what red flags look like at this stage of your life. You learned what questions to ask earlier. You learned what boundaries to set sooner. You learned how important consistency is. You learned what you will and won't tolerate. This knowledge will protect you in the future. Third, your intuition isn't broken. It was actually working the entire time. Every moment of confusion, every sense that something was off, every instinct that made you uncomfortable, that was your intuition trying to warn you. The problem wasn't that your intuition failed. The problem was that you were taught not to trust it, to rationalize it away, to give people the benefit of the doubt even when that doubt was trying to protect you. Moving forward, your job is to honor your intuition, to trust it, to act on it earlier rather than later. Fourth, you're not too old or too damaged or too difficult for healthy love. The fact that you experienced manipulation doesn't say anything negative about you. It says something negative about the person who chose to manipulate you. You are worthy of clear, consistent, honest, respectful love. You are worthy of a partner who makes you feel secure, not confused. You are worthy of someone who shows up for you reliably and treats you with integrity. Don't let this experience convince you otherwise. Fifth, take time before jumping back into dating. Process what happened. Rebuild your trust in yourself. Reconnect with your standards and your non-negotiables. Remember who you are outside of that confusing dynamic. Spend time with people who see you clearly and appreciate you genuinely. Do things that make you feel confident and alive. Heal the parts of you that doubt your worth or your judgment. You don't have to rush back into dating just because you're afraid that taking time off will make it harder to find someone. The quality of your next relationship is more important than the speed at which you enter it. And you'll be much better equipped to recognize and attract genuine love when you've fully released the confusion and doubt from this experience. Now, I want to talk about something that might be difficult to hear, but that's important. Sometimes recognizing these manipulation patterns makes you realize that you've encountered them before, that this isn't the first time you've experienced this confusion, that there's a pattern in your own relationship history of being drawn to or staying with men who keep you off balance. If that's the case, it's worth exploring why. Not from a place of self-blame, but from a place of self-awareness and growth. Sometimes we're drawn to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is unhealthy. Sometimes we mistake intensity for intimacy and confusion for chemistry. Sometimes we believe that love should be hard and confusing because that's what we observed growing up. Sometimes we're recreating dynamics from our family of origin. Sometimes we struggle to trust clear, consistent, straightforward love because it doesn't feel like love to us if it doesn't come with drama or uncertainty. If you recognize these patterns, consider working with a therapist who specializes in relationships and attachment. Consider reading about attachment styles, trauma bonding, and relationship patterns. Consider journaling about your relationship history and looking for themes. The goal isn't to pathologize yourself or to suggest that you're broken and need fixing. The goal is to understand yourself better so you can make different choices moving forward. Because here's the thing, you can learn to recognize all the red flags. You can set perfect boundaries. You can communicate flawlessly. But if you're unconsciously drawn to men who create confusion, if some part of you is more comfortable with uncertainty than with stability, if you sabotage healthy connections because they feel boring or wrong in some way, then all the knowledge in the world won't protect you until you address those deeper patterns. Let's talk about what healthy, clear, non-confusing dating and relationship development looks like so you have a reference point. In healthy connections, communication is consistent. He reaches out regularly, responds in reasonable time frames, and initiates contact as much as you do. You're not guessing whether he's interested. His interest is evident in his actions. In healthy connections, progress is steady. Things move forward. Plans get made and kept. The relationship deepens over time. You're not stuck in the same place for months wondering what you are to each other. In healthy connections, his words match his actions. If he says he wants to see you, he makes plans to see you. If he says you're important to him, he treats you as a priority. If he says he's serious about finding a relationship, his behavior reflects seriousness, not game playing. In healthy connections, you feel secure, not confused. You understand where you stand. You know what to expect. You feel confident in his interest and his intentions. You might feel nervous about whether the relationship will work out long term, but you're not confused about what's happening in the present. In healthy connections, vulnerability is reciprocal. He shares and you share. He asks questions and you ask questions. He's interested in knowing you and he lets you know him. It doesn't feel one-sided. It doesn't feel like you're doing all the emotional work. In healthy connections, your concerns are heard and addressed. When something bothers you, when you have a question, when you need clarification, he responds with openness and a genuine desire to resolve the issue. He doesn't make you feel crazy for having concerns. He doesn't gaslight you or minimize your feelings. In healthy connections, you feel energized, not drained. Yes, relationships require effort and energy, but they should also fill your cup. You should feel better about yourself when you're with him, not worse. You should feel more confident in the relationship over time, not less. You should feel like you're building something together, not like you're constantly trying to get him to participate in building something. If your experience doesn't look like this, if you're constantly confused, uncertain, doing all the work, feeling drained, questioning yourself, and making excuses for his behavior, you're not in a healthy connection. You're in a confusing one, and you deserve better. I also want to address the men who create confusion unintentionally because they're confused themselves or because they lack emotional intelligence or self-awareness. These men do exist, and the confusion they create is just as damaging even if it's not malicious. A man might genuinely not know what he wants. He might genuinely be struggling with commitment issues stemming from past pain. He might genuinely have poor communication skills and not realize how his behavior affects you. He might genuinely be dealing with mental health challenges that make consistency difficult. And while these are real issues that deserve compassion, they don't excuse the impact on you. Your compassion for his struggles doesn't obligate you to accept behavior that's hurting you. Your understanding of why he's confusing doesn't mean you have to stay confused. Here's what you need to remember about unintentionally confusing men. Their unintentional confusion is still their responsibility to address. If he's confused about what he wants, he needs to figure that out. Ideally, before involving you, or at minimum with a therapist or on his own time, not by stringing you along while he figures it out. If he has commitment issues, he needs to work on them, not make them your problem. If he has poor communication skills, he needs to improve them, not expect you to translate and interpret everything he says and does. If he has mental health challenges, he needs to manage them, not use them as an excuse for treating you poorly. You can have compassion, you can be understanding, but you don't have to sacrifice your own well-being, clarity, and peace of mind to accommodate someone else's lack of clarity about what they want and how to treat people. The question to ask yourself is he actively working on these issues? Or is he just using them as excuses? Is he in therapy? Is he reading books? Is he having genuine conversations with you about his struggles and working to minimize their impact on you? Is he showing actual progress over time? Or is he just repeatedly explaining why he is the way he is and expecting you to adjust your expectations accordingly? Growth and effort matter. Self-awareness without action is just an excuse. And at this stage of your life, you don't have unlimited time and energy to pour into someone who isn't actively working to become a better partner. There's also an important conversation to have about your role in all of this. And this isn't about blame, but about empowerment. Because while you can't control his behavior, you can control your response to it. You can't make him be clear, but you can refuse to tolerate confusion. You can't make him be consistent, but you can walk away from inconsistency. You can't make him treat you well, but you can establish standards for how you will be treated and enforce consequences when those standards aren't met. Your power is in your choices. Your power is in your boundaries. Your power is in your willingness to walk away from what doesn't serve you, even when it's hard, even when you're afraid, even when you wish things could be different. One of the most powerful things you can do is get very clear on your non-negotiables before you start dating. What are the things you absolutely need in a relationship? What are the things you absolutely won't tolerate? Write them down. Be specific. Don't include things like chemistry or connection because those are important, but they're not behavioral standards. Include things like, I need consistent communication. I need someone who follows through on plans. I need someone who's willing to define the relationship within a reasonable time frame. I need someone whose words match their actions. I need someone who takes responsibility for their behavior. I need someone who respects my boundaries. I need someone who's emotionally available. Then, when you start dating someone, use this list as a filter. At the first sign that someone isn't meeting these non-negotiables, address it clearly. If the behavior doesn't change, walk away immediately. Don't wait to see if it gets better. Don't give multiple chances. Don't make exceptions because he's great in other ways. Your non-negotiables are called non-negotiables for a reason. Here's a hard truth. Sometimes we tolerate confusion and poor treatment because we've bought into the idea that demanding better is demanding too much. We've internalized messages that tell us we should be grateful for any attention at any age. We've been told we're too old to be picky. We've been told our standards are too high. We've been told we need to be more flexible, more understanding, more patient, more compromising. And some of that messaging comes from a well-intentioned place of encouraging us not to nitpick over superficial things. But there's a huge difference between being flexible about superficial preferences and compromising on fundamental needs for respect, consistency, honesty, and emotional availability. You are not demanding too much by wanting clarity. You are not asking too much by expecting consistency. You are not being difficult by requiring that someone's words match their actions. These are basic relationship requirements, not luxury upgrades. The scarcity mindset that tells you that you should accept confusion because dating is hard and good, men are rare is a trap. Yes, dating is challenging. Yes, finding someone truly compatible requires patience and effort. But staying with someone who confuses and mistreats you isn't the solution to dating being hard. It's just trading one problem for a worse problem. Being alone is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Being with someone who makes you doubt yourself, who drains your energy, who keeps you perpetually uncertain, who plays games with your emotions, that's worse than being alone. Being alone is neutral. Being mistreated is negative. Don't be so afraid of alone that you settle for harmful. I want to talk specifically to those of you who are thinking, but I've already invested so much time in this person. We've been seeing each other for months or even years. I've told him things I haven't told anyone else. I've integrated him into my life. My friends know about him. I've been patient. I've been understanding. I've tried so hard to make this work. How can I walk away now after all that investment? This is called the sunk cost fallacy, and it's one of the most powerful forces keeping people in bad situations. The idea is that because you've already invested so much time, energy, emotion, and effort, walking away means all of that was wasted. But here's the truth about sunk costs. The time and energy you've already spent is gone. You can't get it back whether you stay or whether you leave. The only question that matters is, what's the best choice for your future? Is staying in this confusing, unfulfilling dynamic the best choice for your future? Or is walking away, even after all you've invested, the better choice? Think of it this way. If you've been driving in the wrong direction for 2 hours, you don't keep driving in that direction just because you've already spent 2 hours going that way. You turn around. Yes, you've lost 2 hours, but if you keep going in the wrong direction, you'll lose even more time. The same logic applies here. Yes, you've invested months or years, but if this relationship isn't giving you what you need, staying doesn't honor that investment. It just means more time lost to confusion and uncertainty. Walking away honors the time you've spent by saying, I've learned what I need to learn from this experience, and now I'm choosing something better for myself moving forward. Your past investment doesn't obligate your future participation. Let's talk about what happens after you leave a confusing situationship and start dating again. You might feel scared, you might feel gun-shy, you might feel hyper-vigilant, looking for signs of confusion or manipulation in every interaction. You might feel cynical or jaded. These feelings are understandable, but they can also hold you back from recognizing genuine connection when it appears. The goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone. The goal is to become discerning. The goal is to trust yourself, to recognize red flags early, and to walk away without agonizing over it. The goal is to not make excuses for behavior that doesn't meet your standards. The goal is to value clarity and to refuse to engage with confusion. When you meet someone new, you don't need to interrogate them or test them or put them through some elaborate vetting process. You just need to pay attention. Pay attention to whether their words match their actions. Pay attention to how you feel during and after interactions with them. Pay attention to whether you're getting clearer about who they are and what they want over time, or more confused. Pay attention to whether they respond well when you express needs or concerns. Pay attention to whether they're consistent. Pay attention to whether progress is being made or you're stuck in the same place. Pay attention to whether you're doing all the work or they're meeting you halfway. Pay attention to whether they add to your life or drain from it. Your intuition will tell you what you need to know if you're willing to listen to it and act on it. Here's something that might surprise you. When you meet someone who's genuinely interested, emotionally available, and relationship ready, it might feel strange at first. It might feel too easy. It might feel boring compared to the intensity and drama of confusing situationships. You might find yourself creating problems or looking for red flags because the clarity and consistency feel uncomfortable. This is worth examining. if you find yourself more attracted to confusion than to clarity, more interested in men who keep you guessing than men who are straightforward, more engaged when you're uncertain than when you're secure, you might have some healing work to do around what you associate with love and connection. Because healthy love shouldn't feel boring. It should feel peaceful. It should feel secure. It should feel like coming home, not like solving a puzzle. I want to leave you with some final thoughts. First, your confusion is not your fault, but your response to it is your responsibility. You cannot control whether someone chooses to manipulate you, but you can control whether you stay once you recognize what's happening. Second, trust yourself. Your confusion is information. Your discomfort is data. Your sense that something is off is probably accurate. Stop talking yourself out of what you know. Third, you deserve clarity. You deserve consistency. You deserve honesty. You deserve someone who makes you feel secure, not someone who keeps you guessing. These aren't unreasonable standards. These are basic requirements for healthy relationships. Fourth, being alone is not a failure. Being alone and at peace is infinitely better than being with someone and feeling confused, anxious, uncertain, and drained. Protect your peace. Value your time. Guard your energy. Fifth, the right person will not confuse you. They will not make you question yourself. They will not keep you guessing. They will not leave you feeling uncertain. They will show up consistently. They will communicate clearly. They will make their interest and their intentions obvious. They will make you feel chosen, not confused. And finally, you have more power than you think. The power to set standards. The power to enforce boundaries. The power to walk away from what doesn't serve you. The power to choose yourself. Use it. If this video resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these patterns, if you feel like you finally understand what's been happening in your dating life, I need you to do something for me. First, like this video so more women can find this information. Your like helps the algorithm show this content to women who desperately need to hear it. Second, leave a comment below. Share your experience. Share what you learned. Share what clicked for you. Your comment might be exactly what another woman needs to hear to give her the courage to walk away from confusion and choose clarity. Third, share this video. Send it to your friends, your sisters, your daughters, any woman in your life who's navigating the dating world. This information could save someone you love from months or years of manipulation and confusion. Fourth, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, subscribe now and hit that notification bell. I'm publishing content every single week that's designed to help you navigate relationships with wisdom, clarity, and power. This channel exists to give you the information that empowers you to make better choices, recognize manipulation, protect your peace, and create the relationship life you truly want. And finally, if you found tremendous value in this video, if it gave you clarity you've been searching for, if it helped you understand something that's been confusing you for a long time, please consider supporting this channel with a super thanks. Creating in-depth, thoroughly researched, comprehensive content like this takes significant time and effort, and your support allows me to continue doing this work and reaching more women with this life-changing information. Remember, you are worthy of clear, honest, consistent, respectful love. You are not too old. You are not too damaged. You are not too demanding. You are not the problem. The problem is men who choose manipulation over honesty. The problem is a dating culture that normalizes confusion. The problem is a society that tells women to lower their standards and be grateful for breadcrumbs. But you don't have to accept that. You have the power to choose differently. You have the wisdom to recognize what's happening. You have the strength to walk away from what doesn't serve you. Trust yourself. Honor your intuition. Protect your peace. Demand clarity. Accept nothing less than what you deserve. because you deserve everything. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay strong, stay wise, and remember your worth.